Welcome to Thrive in Design, a podcast about making money in beautiful interiors as it relates to product-based businesses in the interior design industry. Each week, we'll discuss innovative strategies on how to approach product development and design sales in a shifting market. I'm your host, Nicole Lachey Ben. At Thrive in Design, we help interior product companies in crafting compelling online and offline go-to-market strategies, enabling them to enhance their brand visibility and revenue within the hospitality design segment. We're taking on new clients. If this podcast has been intriguing to you, let's chat about how our team can help you thrive in 2024 and beyond. Head to thriveindesign.co/contact. Hello and welcome back for another episode of the Thrive in Design podcast. We are making waves through season 5 of this podcast. I'm Nicole Lachey Ben, and I'm the host and the CEO of Thrive in Design, which is a design consultancy focusing on helping interior product companies increase their brand awareness and revenue. We do this by taking a special look at the designer's experience with your brand so that we can refine that and make sure that your story is told cohesively on and offline. So I know the last couple of episodes we've been talking about storytelling, and then the last episode we had an amazing guest to talk about storytelling specifically related to the interior design industry. And I loved how she shared her E3 method for storytelling. In my episode 7, we talked about the basics of storytelling, but our last guest, Erica from Creative, actually broke down a methodology that is even more simpler than you could ever imagine. So if you haven't listened to the last episode with our guest, Erica of Creative, please go back and listen and hear her E3 method of storytelling that's important for every interior product brand or every interior design focused brand that is out there in the industry. So we're going to continue our conversation about storytelling today. But before we get into that, I actually want to do a recap of 2023. So 2023 was a really good year for me and Thrive and Design my business. I feel like I got super clear, super focused, and got even more niched in who I wanted to serve through my service offerings. When I first rebranded as Thrive and Design, I was like, okay, I'm going to help interior product companies. But I didn't have a specificity for the size of the interior product company, how much revenue they were doing in a year, what were their main problems, or what I call triggering events with my business development team that they were experiencing for me to identify, like, okay, you're experiencing X, so now I know I can help you with Y, or implement a strategy to help you with whatever pain point. So in 2023, I got very clear on how I could help and when I could help an interior product brand. So a lot of the people who I attracted last year and will be working with moving forward were in the following scenarios. So let me tell you the scenarios that interior product companies were in, and let me know if you identify with any of these scenarios. The first scenario that I found is that I would come across an interior product company, or they would seek me out, and they have been in business for a while, but they were focused on doing custom interior products. So a designer might come to them, or maybe even an end user or homeowner might come to them for something custom, or bespoke is the fancy word to say it in their industry. But now this interior product company has realized that, hey, they don't want customers to just stumble across them and to do a one-time thing or a one-time project or one-time product and then move on. Rather, they want to create a collection that gets specified by A&D. And this method, or this way of going about product development and sales, is much different than creating custom products. So if an interior product is coming to me going from custom interior products to collection, they had a much different strategy that they need to be specified and used in A&D, right? So that's scenario number 1. The second scenario that I found when attracting interior product companies is that they had been in business for a few years, maybe like 3 to 5 years, and their leadership is very strong skill set in a few different things. They are very strong in manufacturing. So they have amazing, beautiful products that are different from anything that has been seen in the industry before. They also are very strong in operations. So they understand like how to manufacture, how to get the product out the door and deliver it to the job site. They might even understand the operations of the website and what needs to be done in terms of, or what needs to be shared in terms of spec sheets with designers, or what resources need to go out to their sales team, which they are relying heavily on. But they are hoping to bring somebody in that has more of a business mindset and a strategy mindset and understands different markets within the US and where they need to be focused on and what strategy needs to go in place, right? So this company is just like, okay, we are really good at manufacturing. We are really good at operations, but we've got some success, but we don't really know how we got here. And we really need a strategy to move forward. The next scenario that interior product company is typically when they reach out to me or I stumble across them is they are an established interior product company in another country. So a lot of the times, and especially in 2023, I've had people reach out to me, you know, they're manufacturers in Italy, in Argentina, in Brazil, right? And they are very established in their country and probably even a household name there. The design industry knows them well, but now they want to be well known in the US. They want to be specified by designers in the US and ultimately get sales from those specifications in the US. But they don't understand the lay of the land, the markets, the strategies, all the brand touch points that they need to focus on and where they need to start and actually phase into a strategy. Or the last scenario that interior product companies are in when they reach out to me or I find them is they just have an old school way of selling. So these are the companies that they might be doing millions and millions of dollars in sales every year, but they are waiting for the old normal to come back. They are like, okay, we are focused on in-person interactions and getting into the design firm and getting in front of designers. And we want to just show our product in our old school way. And they're starting to realize that like the pandemic kind of shook us up. You know, maybe we don't need to be old school anymore. Maybe we need to start thinking about ways that we can integrate online and offline. Maybe we just need somebody to come in and just like give us some advice on how we can be forward thinking. So this is the 4 scenarios that interior product companies are typically in when they reach out to me or when I kind of do some research on them and reach out to them. But it's more so the first 3 scenarios than the last. Okay, so all of these scenarios sound completely different. You know, one is switching from custom products to a collection. One doesn't have really a business or sales strategy mindset, but they're good at manufacturing operations. Another is coming from another country and looking to launch it to the US. All of those scenarios sound completely different, but really they're saying the exact same thing. And what are they saying? You're like, what? How are they saying the same thing? They're saying to me, Nicole, how can I successfully launch my products, my interior products in the US? What strategy should I implement online and offline? And how can I make my brand story cohesive across platforms and brand touch points? Okay. So even though all of those scenarios sounded completely different, they're looking to do the same thing. Launch successfully, be cohesive across platforms, and have an online and offline strategy. That's it. So when somebody works with me, they need to understand my beliefs. And I talked about these beliefs in a few of the episodes in this season. And that was that I believe to increase your brand awareness and revenue, an interior product company needs to focus on the designer's experience in these online and offline touch points, in the 5 brand touch points that we keep coming back to. And I believe that the main touch points that need to focus on are the showroom, the firm library presence, events, product presentations, and roles of the reps. So if you believe these things, then we can work well together and figure out the strategy that you need to successfully launch your interior product companies in the US. Okay, and the last thing they need to get on board with in terms of my beliefs is that you must have a good story that needs to be cohesive throughout your customer journey at each of the touch points that I mentioned before. So let's go back to the core questions that an interior product company are trying to figure out when they come to Thrive in Design. And the first one was, Nicole, how can I successfully launch my products in the US? So this sounds like a very simple question, but it's broken down to a few different things. So when I'm first working with a company, I first need to understand which vertical are you trying to be successful in within the interior design industry? Meaning, what part of the industry are your products suitable for? For example, are they good for hospitality? Are they good for residential? Are they good for healthcare? Are they good for workplace? Are they good for retail? Because the strategy will be different for each of those different sectors. Hospitality involves, a very laborious process in terms of the design. There are model rooms and model room approvals. There are purchasing agents and GCs and workrooms and all the things. In residential, you could be going to market in a couple of different ways. You could be creating an e-commerce platform where you are selling your product direct to consumer, or you could be focusing on A&D, where you need to build out a sales team or partner with multi-line reps to get your products in front of those designers and ultimately get specified and ultimately get purchased. Within healthcare, does your product meet the specific codes that healthcare requires? Are your products bleach cleanable? Will the building maintenance know how to use your products? Are they durable for high traffic areas? If it's a workplace, have you identified all of the different people that go along that design journey in terms of the office furniture dealer, the design firm, the architect, the tenant? So in each of these different verticals, we're going to require a different strategy and a different understanding of if your product meets the standards for the vertical that you're trying to get within, right? So that's the basics. They're asking me, or you're asking me, how can I be successful to launch my interior products? And I'm going to ask you back, where are your products going to be used, or what are they suitable for? So then we can go forward in the next stage of research. Then I want to understand the style of your interior products. Whether you have carpet or furniture or flooring or wall covering or paint, you might have a specific style that your products are within, right? It might be more modern and contemporary, or maybe it looks more traditional, or maybe it pulls from one of the historic design history time periods. So we want to understand what is the style that is within, so that we can then determine where do we need to focus on in terms of the markets within the US, the design firms within those markets, the style of designs that those design firms do, so that we can have success in getting your product specified on those projects. And the last thing I'm going to ask in terms of creating a launch strategy is to figure out, why should anybody care about your products? And I know that sounds a little bit blunt, but it's really like, why should anybody care? Most of the time in this industry, especially with companies that have been around for, 2 and 3 decades and have made hundreds of millions of dollars, and you are coming as a new kid on the block, you need to have a good story to tell people so that they can care about your product over the brand that they have been loyal to for their last 5, 6, 10, 20 projects over the last 20, 30 years. So what is your story, and why should anybody care? Why is it different from any of your competitors? And I'm asking these 3 questions because clearly there's a lot of information baked into it of the vertical that you're focusing on in the interior design industry, what style your products fit within, and then why should anybody care? Because then that's going to help us shape the story and the strategy that we create, and create a way to engage with your audience. Again, we don't want that one-way communication that we talked about a couple of episodes ago, but we want a 2-way communication of your brand story and all of the touch points, so that people can start to understand your brand, understand your products, understand why it's important to use your products over any of your competitors. So, quick story. I'm going to keep going in terms of this. A quick story. I was working with a brand a little while ago, and he came to me with one of these scenarios that I talked about earlier before. And this was a high-end residential product brand, and he was looking to go from custom collection to actual collection to be specified by A&D. And this person actually wanted to share the story behind the furniture behind the brand and felt that it was very important for his audience, aka designers, to understand this story behind the brand. I completely agreed. But the story was structured in a way where this person was just sharing the story through a one-way conversation in a documentary style, and that's it. The upside of it was that this company had a great story, had a great backstory of how the company had been around for a couple of decades, had a great backstory about their founder. But the downside is that they were not delivering the story in a way that would spark engagement, leads, specifications, and of sales. And again, this was not a two-way conversation between his audience, his intended audience, and the brand. So what would I have done differently to guide him? So we didn't go down the path of what I normally do in terms of creating strategy, creating a strategic plan, and then actually executing that strategy on his behalf. But if I did, I would have done this differently in the approach. First of all, I would have started off with way more research. Again, I am an advocate for research in all the work that I do and all the work that I do with clients. So that research would have consisted of primary and secondary research. So primary research typically includes things like surveys, observations, and interviews of the audience that you're trying to create a story for or to create a strategy for. So if designers are your audience, you would be getting primary research on that audience. Secondary research includes looking at existing case studies, white papers, competitor research. What are your competitors doing that is landing well with the audience that you are trying to reach? And we're not doing that competitor research to copy what your competitors are doing, but you do need to understand that if your competitors are doing something that is working, that means that needs to inform the strategy and the content or the story that you are shaping to land with those exact same people. So if I was to do something differently for this specific brand, I would be doing research first. The next thing after that research, again, would be to synthesize my findings. Out of all the research that I did, both primary and secondary research, what were the findings that I came across? What things popped up over and over again? And from those things that popped up over and over again, how can I now create insights that would inform the strategy that I move forward with? So it might look different from creating a documentary series or something like that, where it's a one-way conversation. And instead, it might look like, who knows, right? Because I didn't do the research. I didn't see the insights that came up in the research. So therefore, I can't come up with a strategy based on actual findings. But that's how I would do it. But that brings me to my next point about strategy, because strategy should not come from the top of your head. It should come from research. It should come from insights from that research and then move forward. So in terms of strategy, when people are asking me, Nicole, what strategy should I implement online and offline? It really comes down to this. If you really want to be a successful interior product brand, you can't just do one or the other. A lot of times people will come to me and say, okay, like I said before, they'll say, oh, can you post for me on social media? Or sometimes they'll say, like, can you be my sales rep? And that's a no as well. But you can't do one or the other. You really have to have a comprehensive strategy that infuses online and offline. And I mentioned this one specific company a lot during this season of the podcast, as well as some of the former seasons of the podcast. But if you do not know about ThinkLab, they are one of my favorite market research companies in the industry. And they share a lot of different insights around the interior design industry, especially interior products, and how we should be moving forward in terms of innovation. And they recently coined the phrase phygital, right? So I know we've been talking about online and offline, physical and digital, but they've merged that word together to say phygital. And that's a mingling of those two words together. And I want you all to start thinking about phygital as well, because once you get your story straight, you have to figure out how you're going to integrate the story online and offline, and especially in a phygital experience that resonates with your audience. And of course, it's going to be based on research. Okay, so let's rewind again and remind you of a few things. Where are you starting from right now? how are you currently delivering your story? And you should have done this in the homework assignment that I gave you a couple of episodes ago. What systems or processes do you have in place to deliver your story? Are they converting well? What's the data behind all of the touch points that you have? And then you have to start thinking about what actually needs to be tweaked. And so all of this to say that the themes that we're talking about is storytelling, the touch points, and those touch points are ultimately also tied to your sales funnel. Another quick story that I want to share with you guys is really about a lot of the clients that I work with. If they are in one of the scenarios that I shared with you earlier in this episode, we are in a good spot. But in addition to focusing on those interior product companies, I actually spend a good amount of time during the week talking with small business owners around the country. So they might be in a scenario that I mentioned earlier during this episode. And most of the time they're like, okay, we need to increase sales. Because I know you guys are listening to me. You're like, okay, yeah, Nicole, all of that sounds good and dandy. Sounds great. We need to work on our story. We need to work on our experience and blah, blah, blah. Right? But ultimately you're like, okay, what's the bottom line? How are we getting our ROI? When I tell you that everything is linked to your sales, trust me, they are. One example is one of a client that I was working with, and this is a new brand. She had been working in the interior design industry for decades, actually, and she decided to go out on her own and start her own brand. And she's like, okay, Nicole, I need to focus on sales. And like I said before, she came to me saying, how can I successfully launch in the US? Right? That was the core of what she was saying. The problem that she was having is that, one, she did not have her story clear, and she didn't properly articulate why her story should be relevant to anybody. She also didn't have a web presence. There was no positioning for her company on LinkedIn. In offline experiences, she was not clear on how to share her elevator pitch, no clear systems for follow-up if she met people in real life. So going into that scenario with a company that was coming to me saying, hey, Nicole, I want to increase my sales. I want to increase my revenue. How can I successfully launch? The things that I recommended to her was, of course, get your story straight. And the next thing that we were able to do was come up with a phased plan on what she needed to do step by step. Okay, first, of course, her online presence needed to be refined. Her positioning, her messaging needed to be refined. She needs to have clear steps in her sales funnel to attract people, to turn them into a lead, to then nurture that lead and ultimately turn that lead into a paying customer. So my recommendations went on and on from there. And then we phased into a process of making sure that everything was cohesive across her platforms and across all of her brand touch points that we've talked about in this episode and other episodes in this season. So, short story. You're thinking, okay, Nicole, I'm on board. Storytelling is important. I want to get on board with you to figure out what is important for my brand online and offline. So short story, you're like, okay, how can I do this? Well, the answer is hire, thrive, and design. The long story for that is you need to create your strategic plan. So you'll start again, as I mentioned in other episodes, with an audit and a strategic plan for how you move forward. Then you'll figure out what is most pressing in that strategic plan. Is it focusing on your product presentations, your showroom, your role of your reps, et cetera, et cetera? And then over the next 6 to 24 months, you'll start to make changes little by little and watch how people start to draw to your brand more, start to specify more, and how your revenue starts to increase. And just a reminder, Thrive in Design is taking on new clients this year in 2024. So if you're an interior product company and you're listening to this resonates with you, let us help you increase your brand awareness, specifications, and revenue. One conversation won't hurt. I promise it won't be a salesy conversation. It'll just be a conversation to really understand where you are, what you need help with, and create a project proposal from there. So what do you need to do? Of course, as always, I tell you to send me an email, hello@nicolashea.com, or go over to LinkedIn and send me a DM, and we can schedule a time to meet just over Zoom, no pressure, and we'll go from there to see if we can work together, if there's any synergies between our brand. If not, at least we'll have an amazing conversation and new friends in the industry. So I hope to hear from you soon. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining us this week on Thrive in Design. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Thrive in Design. And for more strategies on how your product company can innovate in the interior design industry, head to training.thriveindesign.co. As always, subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave us a review so we can continue to create captivating content. See you next week.